Spoiler alert, you are going to die. At some point in the future through trauma, or by the slow and steady erosion of time, that form your soul is wearing succumbs to entropy and falls apart. Everything that makes you, will escape containment and fall away. Be it a physical body or an energetic matrix or something more exotic, one day the you that you consider you will cease being an active member of this or any other world within known reality. The self-titled long will in fact go longer before reaching this point, but they too inevitably fade away. Names and the hours they serve claim to be eternal. We have lists of the verified dead for both those categories that disprove that claim. It seems the price of being born is to one day inevitably return that life back to the universe that granted it to you in the first place. As the years pass and the touch of gray comes over us, our occult researches inevitably turn to the means of preserving ourselves past our natural lifespan. Our egos simply refuse to admit the well-documented fact that they will cease to exist, and we flail against the natural courses of destiny. But no matter how many alchemical concoctions you consume, how many ordeals you pass through, how many innocents one sacrifices to add more sand to the hourglass, the hourglass inevitably runs out, and we are no more. But as any of us with a modicum of spiritual knowledge knows, something remains behind. We've all passed through the white door to the meager underworld beyond it. We've spoken to the preserved consciousness of those long passed away. We've felt the echoes of those who've gone before us in the lost and the lonely places. We've even animated the corpses left behind for servants to enact revenge or for simple amusement. But what do we leave behind, and who, if anyone, cares for, or alternatively exploits what we do leave? So for this Samhain special, let's discuss the Ministers of Death. Hello, I'm Dr. Aaron Peel. Welcome to Hush House Lectures, where we dive deeply into the lore of the secret history's shared universe. Any of you with a passing familiarity with the material sciences knows that energy isn't lost, but merely transferred from one form to another. You may find the processes of decay aesthetically displeasing, but it is absolutely necessary for the cycles of life to continue on this world. Every scrap of food you consume came originally from the rot of organic material providing nutrients to the soil. Even if you aren't consuming the plants directly, the animals you eat did. As the principle of the Grail dictates, we consume and are consumed. Such is the nature of nature, and your soul is no different. So let's discuss how the universe recycles us for future projects. If you work with the Kennedy correspondence of the soul in life is defined as being made up of 9 different aspects. First, the one part of the soul that can actually be touched, the physical body, Kennedy oddly refers to as health. This is the fleshy envelope kindly lent to us for our duration within this world, and when we are no longer in need of it, we kindly return it back to the earth that gave it to us. Unless you've got the capital to waste to chuck your ashes into the void as a form of posthumous space tourism, which seems wasteful and frankly a little rude. The hour that governs the body's transition is the sun in rags. This hour is one of the few solar hours that survived the maiming of the sun during the intercalculate. The sun in rags represents the sunset aspect of the sun. The sun represents the material world and alchemical symbolism, so the sunset represents the end of material existence and the reclamation of the material remains. This is why when we invoke the sun in rags in ritual, we must provide some form of energy, be it as tangible as flesh and blood or intangible as the emotional energy of sorrow. This provides the fuel for the desired result. The sun in rags influence consumes the energy invested in that form you are wearing back to the earth to be reused by the Earth Mothers for future projects. Next, let us talk of the more spiritual aspects of the soul. First, the Fet. The Fet is often referred to as the astral body in lower esoteric works, and it is the part of us that wanders through the dream realms of the Mensis. In life, normally the Fet wanders aimlessly through the woods and the adjacent dream realms, when of course we dream. When we use rituals to travel the Mensis in search of wisdom, power, or simply to alleviate the dullness of material existence, we are harnessing and controlling the Fet consciously and directing it as a remote observer. Upon death, the Fet becomes, well, unfettered. Without conscious direction, it will wander through the dream realms until it finally loses all cohesion and returns to the primal chaos of nowhere as raw dream potential. However, there is an hour that dedicates themselves to retrieving and preserving this aspect of ourselves, the Madrigal. The Madrigal is another surviving solar hour, and they, or more likely one of their psychopomp spirits, such as the ones depicted on this card, guide the Fet to the White Door, where they become the voiceless dead. These mouthless spirits retain elements of their past nature and can be consulted for information by a diligent magus of at least moderate occult talent. As their name indicates, they cannot speak as they now lack the required parts of the soul to do so, but they can communicate with a written pictographic form of the language of symbols that dreamers can recall upon waking. Another aspect of the Madrigal is that they can transfer the remaining life force of an individual whose life is ended prematurely into a material form known as the cindered tally. This was a form of esoteric currency once manufactured by the Assassins Guild known as the Reckoners until their dissolution just before World War II. Alternative forms of the tally production have been created with less ethical issues since then. One last note on the fate of the Fet. The Madrigal isn't the only entity with an interest in the disposal of the Fet. The eldritch god from nowhere, known as the Crowned Growth, hungers for the Fet. He rises from the depths of nowhere and prowls the lower Mensis at certain astrological events. He will consume the Fet of any dead or living individual that they encounter. Fet consumed in this matter does not die, but dissolves into the screaming mass of eternally suffering soul stuff that comprise the Crown Growth's fungal-like structure. This is why conducting proper funerary rites to summon the Madrigal's servants to conduct the Fet swiftly to the White Door to avoid such an outcome is important. No one wants a piece of their soul to end up like something seen out of a Cronenberg film. Next, let's discuss the Wist. This is the element of the soul containing our memory, our identity, and our name. It is our story, and is appropriate the hour that looks after it is the patron of Hush House himself, the Elegast. Upon death, his agents take our Wist and inscribe its story onto the ever-growing ebony walls of his mansions within the abyss of nowhere, where it is preserved beyond the ravages of time. There it joins the growing narrative of the universe. This is why the long chosen by the Elegast may only die upon the day he designates for them. They have given their story to him before their deaths, and he has edited it to suit his needs. Now let us speak of the element of Trist. An element of longing, the Trist is most commonly known as the Jungian shadow, the hidden parts of the self that long for the things we and society deny. The image of who we want to be, the dream of the actualized self we yearn to be, the animalistic core of ourselves we fear lurking in the darkness. Why most people's tryst will simply dissolve back into the collective spiritual potential of nowhere for future births, particularly strong tryst will survive the death of the whole self by consuming the Wist. This births a spirit of longing and memory that can linger for centuries and potentially consume the soul of a weak individual and assume their identity. Given this danger, the Menascate, another of the death-related solar powers, will take strong tryst to her house in the moon. As the moon is a reflection of the sun's light, an image of the sun without life, so the tryst is preserved as the unliving image of the soul, a reflection. Even the tryst of dead hours can be found here, if you know where to look. Whether these images are preserved as an eternal Mizam piece, or perhaps blueprints to reconstruct certain important beings for future ages is unknown. It is a matter that requires further study. The next elements of the soul are less unique to the individual souls, but are the forces required for our souls to function. The first of these is Shapt, the ability to communicate with speech and text. Anyone who ever visited the top layer of the Mansis knows this is the gift of the elder goddess Vak, the embodiment of speech. She recalls her gift upon death, which is the primary reason the spirits of the dead are generally silent. Then there is Chor and Herb, the elements of impulse and aggression. These are both elements of the Grail's desire, but each has the assistance of another hour in their composition. The Thunderskin infuses Chor with his living impulse, and the Wolf Divided gives his eternal hunger to Herb. These hours collect their energies once the soul passes from the mortal coil. The lack of these impulses is why the spirits of the dead seem so listless. They have no passions anymore to drive them. Next, we have the Forge of Day's gift of metal, or in the more common vernacular, character. This is the self-discipline that gives us focus to our lives. These are the principles that we stand for, free of external influence. Character, after all, is what you are when no one's looking. The Forge, being the efficient being that she is, has her servants quickly gather up any spent metal after death and return it to the Mallory, where she melts it down to be reused. And then we come to the part of the soul that stands out from the rest, the Faust. A spark of the glory the Watchman stole from the Aegon hatching in the Age of Stone to grant humanity awareness greater than that of animals. Without this stolen spark, all the souls of humanity and the post-humanity would still dwell as the Earth Mother's original design for them, the insectile carapace cross. For good or ill, most of you only enjoy the insights you do because of this act of theft. The morality and long-term complications of this act of intelligent design are still up for debate, but it happened, and as a result, here you are. So what happens to this drop of glory upon our death? By all rights, it should return back to the glory itself for reuse, but the demiurgic watchman intercepts each drop and takes it back for himself. Then he extracts the experience and knowledge of our lives from the drop before inserting it into a new soul for rebirth and eventual reharvesting. This is why the rite of Watchman's sorrow consumes knowledge directly from the mind. You are surrendering a fragment of what the Watchman hungers for in exchange for drawing on a fragment of his power to empower your ritual. This is one of the reasons the Watchman is said not to look upon humanity with mercy. That drop of stolen glory was never meant as a gift. It was an investment he expects to be promptly repaid upon death. However you might feel about this utilitarian involuntary transaction, there is still a very real issue beyond Benjamin Franklin's statement that the two things constant in life are death and taxes being more horribly correct than ever he could imagine. It's that the stolen glory he and we possess was stolen from the now mortally wounded sun, a sun that cannot die and be reborn until all that glory is returned. So, the sun continues to fade in power day by day, and the lands and the seas and the spirits grow weaker by the moment. And even if the holy books are correct in the idea all of life will be wiped out in some colorful cataclysm, that glory will not return to the sun, but instead to the Watchman. And given his past behavior, I don't expect he will give up a drop of that glory until it's pried out of his cold, glowing hands. So we cycle around this conceptual impasse like a moth around a candle flame in a slowly declining spiral with destruction the inevitable conclusion. The universe decays a little more each day. The Watchman continues to squat on his stolen divinity and demand worship from a people who never asked to be elevated. And the Wolf Divided slowly consumes the world from the shadows. We exist within a thin slice of reality between these two indifferent eldritch beings, hoping that we can continue to do so even while the ground slips away under our feet. But I say, do not despair, for when the darkness closes in, there are those who light candles. Thank you for listening, if indeed you still are. I'm Dr. Aaron Peel, and this is Hush House Lectures. If you've enjoyed this, please consider liking this video and subscribing if you haven't done so already. A reminder that the channel's supporters enable such lectures and are the ones that vote on future topics. So if you want more of these, consider becoming a supporter yourself. Link in the description. And have a happy Samhain, however you wish to celebrate. Until next time. I'd like to thank my Acolyte level supporters, whose contributions help this channel grow and hastens the inevitable digital apocalypse and rise of the Dark Lords of Content and Data.